I'm trying this morning to look for the positives, and it is remarkable and tremendous and positive that we now have a foreign secretary who can stride the world. And yesterday he was in Kiev meeting President Zelenskyy, and I'm sure he had good advice. I'm sure he had his eyes opened by the misery of events and experiences of people in Kiev. I still have friends in Kiev who are working very hard to counter the invasion of the menace of Putin. Putin invaded because he wanted to look tough in the advance of an election. As it is, he now looks weak, if indeed he's still alive. There was a very strong rumour, a very specific rumour, that he died at 6:30 at the end of October, on I think the 26th of October, and he may well have done. He may well have done. The fantasy about the doppelgangers may well also be entirely true, and it's going to take a senior statesman like Cameron. It's going to take a series of senior statesmen and women from different countries to support Zelenskyy as his story moves into the background, eclipsed by the horrors of the Gaza-Israel conflict. Now, somebody asked me last night about the contrast between Gaza and Ukraine and how we can be so certain about one and not so certain about the other. Well, I think we can be certain about both. If instead of taking a political view, we take a moral view, the moral issue is very clear when it comes to Putin's invasion of Crimea in 2014 and Putin's later invasion of Ukraine. It's wrong. It's wrong, and it's inappropriate. It doesn't provide any security for Putin. It's just a land grab, and there is no justification for it. When it comes to the Hamas terror attack on October the 7th, there's no justification for it. It's the most horrific terrorist act since 9/11, and the 1,200 people dying, innumerable people wounded, and over 200 people taken into captivity, taken hostage, and are in the tunnels under Gaza. Horrific. And any country that experiences that has a right to self-defense and a right to secure itself against a further invasion by the terrorist organization, which, incidentally, and this mustn't be forgotten, has said on a number of occasions since October the 7th that it plans further terrorist incidents. So it's not finished, and it has every intention of going on. Now, any country facing that has a right to self-defense. The siege by Netanyahu of Gaza is questionable. The aerial bombardment, the collective punishment of the Palestinian people trapped in Gaza, with no way of getting out because Egypt wouldn't open the Rafah crossing, and because Israel refused to open any of the other gates, is lamentable. And there were various options that Netanyahu had at the time. The biggest option, I think, was the outpouring of world sympathy, global sympathy for his plight and his people, meant that he could easily have assembled an international task force, geared towards support from Arab nations, which would have been efficacious, no question, and would have sent the right message to Hamas. Instead, he decided to go it alone, using the full force of the IDF and the Shin Bet, and the Israeli Secret Service and Mossad and so on. I think he was wrong. I think he was absolutely wrong. And more than that, immoral. So, my position is very clear, that it's perfectly possible to be supportive of Israel, to be, and at the same time to be critical of Netanyahu. And I was critical of Netanyahu beforehand. Netanyahu facing fraud charges, Netanyahu facing an enormous upswell of agitation from his own people because of his judicial reforms. And so for Netanyahu, this war is a political move. It's about his political future. If he emerges as a war hero, then it's very difficult to put him behind bars for fraud. It's very difficult to question his political decisions about the law. Very difficult, not impossible. And I trust that Israel will continue its campaign against an abusive leader and against Likud. In fact, I trust that this will mark the turn in Israeli politics from the far right back to something more centrist, if not socialist. It's been 20-odd years of control in Israel by the far right, by Likud and organizations linked to them. Now, I think David Cameron is a perfect leader or perfect foreign minister. Oh, I wish he were a leader, to negotiate a much better position for Britain's relationship and for Britain's future with Israel and with Palestine. You've got to remember that David Cameron was the person who worked well in coalition with one of his political rivals, with Nick Clegg. And the strength of that leadership was rewarded with a very healthy majority in the 2015 election, which meant that the coalition was no longer necessary. And part of the reason for that was his ability as a campaigner, as somebody who could reach out to people. He described himself as the heir to Blair, and he was able to be charming. That's something that I'm afraid Rishi Sunak lacks, and it's something that definitely Suella Braverman lacked, and it's something that Keir Starmer lacks. Rishi Sunak is not a vote winner. David Cameron is. And David Cameron may turn out to be a bigger vote winner than even Boris. Can he or should he turn the tide round? I have my own feelings about that now, and I'm not likely to express them on YouTube yet, but I'm deeply dismayed of I'm deeply dismayed by Rishi Sunak's decision last night. I feel he has crossed a moral divide and frankly no longer deserves to be Prime Minister and no longer deserves to hold any office. He has soiled himself as badly as Suella Braverman. Suella Braverman, that soiling was evident a year ago. And so I suppose Rishi Sunak's statement to redefine unsafe as safe puts him squarely in the bracket with Boris Johnson and with Suella Braverman. What can I say? If anybody is thinking of voting for this party, don't. Anything but.